I did not come to bring peace, but a motherfucking sword.
Ugh, I really wanted to like this game. I've been playing through the Call of Juarez series, and since the first title, people have been telling me to skip the Cartel. They all trashed it. I actually haven't seen a single person say that they liked it. 100% of feedback was negative in my comments. I wanted to find something good to talk about. I was rooting for the underdog, but my god, this game was absolutely terrible, and it nearly killed the whole series. The Cartel was a mistake. That isn't a quote from a critic or an angry YouTuber. That is the words of the CEO of Techland, the studio that made the game. He added, "It wasn't a bad game, but it wasn't finished when we released it." In fact, when Techland wanted to gain their rights to the games from Ubisoft in 2018, they didn't even take this game, essentially leaving it in gaming limbo, as it's the only game not available anywhere on digital markets right now. A month before the game was released, IGN published an article literally titled, "The Cartel Should Be Delayed," essentially bashing the game for not being done. If only Ubisoft and Techland listened.
Give me a fucking break, SA.
The Cartel is the third game in the series Call of Juarez, released in 2011 for the PC, the Xbox 360, and the PlayStation 3. The Cartel is a standalone story in the series, and while there are nods to the prior games with Ben's ancestry, the Gold of Juarez being mentioned for all of 3 minutes, and some familiar locations like City of Juarez, the Ghost Town, and Mendoza's Alcazar, it is an entirely new story, full of drug movie or crime drama cliches. Imagine the movie SWAT in game form, with a tenth of the depth in a script. And the story branches into 3 different endings, after beating the game with all 3 characters, which I doubt anyone ever has. Oh, actually 1% of players out there have. The torture that you achievement hunters put yourselves through. The characters are Ben McCall from LAPD Homicide, Kim Evans from the FBI, and Eddie Guerra from the DEA. These 3 musketeers create the interagency dream team to investigate the cartel, enacting a war on drugs. But it quickly morphs into some sort of political conspiracy or some shit, and it's honestly kinda hard to follow. It's still a Western game per the developers, but instead of rustlers and bandits, the new outlaw is the Mendoza Cartel, a very real terror on both American and Mexican soil, even though Techland states that this game has no basis in real life. As a Polish game studio, I don't think Techland actually put any sort of time or efforts into researching the real-life situation of the cartel or the political relations between countries to try and stop them. There is no actual representation of the horrors of the cartel in the game. You get the occasional news broadcasts of politicians screaming about starting a war or building a wall, but the cartel is treated like any nameless street gang and not the absolutely terrifying presence that they actually are. They kill civilians, they kill journalists and politicians and string them up as warnings to not document their crimes against humanity. They torture families, women, and children to get what they want. They are an unchecked presence in Mexico, and even today, they are a consistent threat that the government just cannot deal with. I'm pretty sure the Mexican military is not as well armed or funded as the cartel. It is a terrifying thing, and this game wastes any opportunity to shine a light on this and have some sort of compelling storyline, but instead it's just cartel bad. The leader of the Mendoza cartel is blasted to bits by a UAV rocket simply to cover up some blackmail from a director in the FBI, just casually ending this massive force like nothing so you don't lose your job. I can't blame Techland too hard. How many game studios make games about any sort of conflict over history and it just boils down to these people being bad? You should kill them. You are the good guy. Whether it's Nazis or Taliban, game studios don't often dive into deeper representation on these things. So why should Techland when it comes to the cartel? Actually, they do go into sex trafficking that occurs, only they showed it backwards. American girls aren't typically kidnapped and trafficked into Mexico. It is overwhelmingly the other way around. I guess you can't win them all.
You wanna thank me? How about Thursday? Maybe she wants to thank me too. I helped save her sister's ass.
Techland was challenged during the development of Bound in Blood. People kept asking whether the traditional Western was still relevant in modern times. They thought the Wild West values were universal and could be effortlessly brought into a modern setting. The Cartel was their attempt at proving it. They wanted to make fans of the Western series happy, but also wanted to try to appeal to a new audience with a generic first-person shooter that everyone else was making. And this is after Rockstar released Red Dead Redemption 1 year prior, making Westerns cool again, and to ditch the theme at this time is just terrible. Of course, the locations were different. They did dive into some of the same places in the prior games, like the ghost town in Colorado and Juarez City in Mexico, one still being abandoned and the other now a thriving city. The changes to Juarez were actually pretty neat, and I wish it emphasized everything a little bit more. Is this the graveyard that Billy helped bury a man in the first game? Is this the church where Ray and Thomas held off Devlin's men, saving Marissa? And is this the cantina where they were all getting drunk when they first laid eyes on her? It's not made clear, but I like to think it is. And it's those moments that I really appreciate. As far as the characters go, Techland went with the idea of multiple protagonists, same as the last two games, but instead of swapping the player character every chapter or so, they decided to offer 3 possible protagonists to play as, but you have to play the whole game as that character, with the other 2 being AI partners. The 3 characters are Ben, a spiritual successor to Ray McCall, badass cop, war veteran, cynical, bitter, and driven by vengeance. Eddie, a smooth talker, a gambler, a DEA agent always ready to make a buck, and Kim, who is a rising star within the FBI and just learning how the real world works. She also has a dark past that she tries to hide in order to continue rising within the FBI. With the decision of having 3 characters, there was of course a strong focus on multiplayer co-op. So strong, in fact, it's a detriment to the single player experience. Lots of mechanics in the game were made for co-op gameplay in mind. Flanking, breaching, the secret side objectives, all focused on having a real life person or 2 playing with you and not 2 AI computers. For the single player version of the game, the story is slightly different for each protagonist, but like I said, you cannot swap between characters between each mission. You are stuck with one character all the way through, meaning that you have to play the game through 3 complete times to get the full experience of the story and every perspective of the game. Techland and its creative team were actually all the same members on this game as they were in prior titles of the series, so it's even more baffling that this product ended up as drastically different. I think there was definitely some great thoughts and care put into the ideas of the game, but unfortunately, as the tale of game development goes, the publisher, Ubisoft, probably put a lot of requirements and restrictions on the team rather than give them the creative freedom to make a great game. And the game could have ended up great. It's not the premise or the idea of the game that makes it bad, but more so the execution of the whole thing. And that could be attributed to the severe crunch hours on Techland to get this game out, and the game simply wasn't done. And they were all mindless zombies at the end, making mistakes and ultimately making a bad game. And they all had the intentions of making a really good game, but crunch just killed them. Some developers actually spent time with gangs of LA and Mexico to get a sense of the life, so I bet offering some deeper perspective on the outlaw side of the story was intended, but not really seen in the final product. As far as narrative inspirations, they structured themselves after some shows that could be considered modern westerns in theme, like Sons of Anarchy and The Shield, and I think that definitely shines through in some of the early 2010s edgelord dialogue.
How much?
What are you trying to say,
We
man?
know Don Levy gave you the key. Just saw it happen.
Whose motherfucking side are you on?
What was I supposed to do, man? One of you's talking internal affairs about me, you see. I don't know who the fuck to trust. Definitely not that bitch.
What?
Techland also knocked it out of the park with the Chrome engine. It is still impressive as ever. This game using the 5th iteration of it that is also used in other games like Dead Island, its spin-off Riptide, as well as the last game in the Call of Juarez series, Gunslinger. According to Techland, some levels, like the one that takes place in a packed nightclub, uses more assets than the entirety of Bound in Blood, which was on Chrome Engine 4, the prior version. It's a shame that assets don't make the game good. You can tell that developers of the game weren't happy with the game when doing release interviews, but there was only so much they can do. They were pushed to put the game out as is, but at the end of the day, it's still Techland's name on the line, and especially so when their creative leaders are telling the fans to trust them as they slap some shit on their plate.
What would you say to Call of Juarez fans who were not so happy with the decision to make the game modern and sort of urban?
You should trust us.
But that's enough of discussing what built up this mess of a game. Let's talk about actually playing this thing. At the start of the game, you can pick any of the 3 characters to control, and the other 2 will be AI, or co-op if you played this back when servers were live. Each of the characters has slightly different abilities. McCall reloads revolvers quickly, Guerra can dual wield SMGs, and Evans has even better aiming with long range weapons. The standard weapon loadouts for the 3 characters are also slightly different. For the most part, the 3 characters control about the same though. I have to admit, I only played this game once, so I only know how the game really plays as Ben, as do most that played the game. 12% of players beating the game as Ben, more than the other 2 characters combined. And I know what you're thinking, combined, that is 22% of players beating the game, not accounting for the people that played through it as multiple characters. But when you see that only 50% of players beat the first chapter, it makes everything seem a little bit more reasonable. No one really liked this game. Apparently, different characters offer different cutscenes as well as endings to the game, but I don't think it changes the story in any substantial way. There are moments when you're playing as Ben and you get a phone call and you notice that your compadres also got a phone call at the same time, so you're all just standing around on the phone talking to different people, but you can only hear your conversation obviously. I can't possibly imagine that I'm really missing much in the other storylines.
So I'd like to start off with some cheese pizza. 1 order of cheese pizza. One pepperoni pizza.
The dialogue of the game is typical edgy shit, but written from the perspective of what a middle schooler thinks sounds cool or badass. Your AI counterparts will constantly rattle off 3 different phrases the entire game. 1 second they're bashing you for bad aim, the other they're telling you not to kill everyone so fast, and it's a constant back and forth of recycled dog shit. They also try and communicate where enemies will be by just shouting left or behind, and 9 times out of 10 there's no one there, because I already killed them 30 seconds ago. It's like they aren't voicing these directions on actual enemies being there, but on the scripted time that enemies are supposed to be there. So if I was just faster on the gun and sprinting ahead to get out of this torture, then I had already killed them. But that doesn't mean Kim isn't still gonna shout a random direction at me when I'm done. And that's not even counting the cringe cutscene dialogue.
DEA!
FBI!
Let me see your hands!
Hey, Flaco. Sorry for the cock block.
Date's over, mamacita.
Overall, the AI is shit, clearly an afterthought, as the developers intended for the game to be played with 3 real people in an online setting, which admittedly would have probably been a whole lot more fun. But the bare bones AI they left to us lonely folk in single player is just ridiculous. The only saving grace there is that they cannot be killed, so you don't have to worry about failing any levels because you didn't babysit them enough. But let's talk about the actual gameplay when it comes to a first-person shooter. The shooting. This is what I had hoped for going into the game. I heard the game was buggy, I heard the plot was non-existent, and the dialogue was cringe, but I had hopes that this game would at least be a fairly entertaining time to run around and shoot people in. It's not. It's probably some of the worst shooting that I've experienced in a game, and I've played 25 to life. Let's start with some good. The gun models look great, and there's a solid variety of pistols, SMGs, and rifles to choose from, even though on a functional standpoint, they all feel entirely the same. The animations are pretty nice, but they are just recycled from Techland's Dead Island, so is that even really a plus for this game? They are modern guns, so no more Winchesters and 6-shooters, but the game would have been better with them. I mean, Ben is holding a double-barreled shotgun on the cover of the game, and that shit's not even in the game. Instead, you get your choice of 3 different pump-action shotguns that lack the punch of a video game shotgun. I have never used a less satisfying shotgun in gaming. They are always the guns that make a presence and make you feel the power of them, but in this game, they are just bad. I had one cool moment with them in my 5-hour run with Ben. 1. Compare that to Gunslinger, the next game in the series where the shotguns feel amazing, but really all the guns just don't feel good in this game. Some weapons have too much recoil, some weapons have no recoil at all, and for a game that is a by-the-books first-person shooter, I feel like the shooting should have been more well done, but it's just not. Bound in Blood was 10 times as satisfying, and every single shooter that came out around this time of the Cartel just blows it out of the water. The guns feel imprecise and floaty. It's hard to tell when you actually hit an enemy, especially when they are behind cover. In Bound in Blood, you can shoot an enemy's leg or an arm that is poking out around the cover and they'll stumble out. In this game, I feel like I hit people in the head and the shot doesn't even register. During the flanking portions, there is constant automatic fire from people blind firing from behind cover. It's nearly impossible to see them. You have to take part in this flanking activity to get around their cover and kill them instead of tactfully shooting their arm or something. I've also never played a game that didn't reward headshots. There's no gratifying screen flash like max pain or sound effect or hit marker or any indication of a headshot, which isn't really a deal breaker to me, but what is upsetting is that it seems like gun damage doesn't even change depending on where you hit somebody. It takes the same amount of shots no matter where you hit them, so I just constantly aim center mass for the majority of the game. This in turn makes choosing which weapon to use a non-argument. While I wanted to try the FAL and the pistols a little bit more throughout the game, I tended to always float back towards the AK or the M4, or in later levels the RPK and the M60 once I unlocked them, simply because they had the largest ammo capacity and made spray and pray gunplay much easier. When precision doesn't matter, why not just keep the 100-round drum in hand? The enemies are also all cookie cutter gangsters, no variation. You fight the same enemies the entire game, and they don't even have any cool ragdoll effects that made shooters of this time fun to play. They just crumple down, even with the shotgun. So this boils down to the entire game being unsatisfying shooting with unsatisfying guns at unsatisfying enemies for the whole game, only to be broken up by 3 special mechanics. 1. Concentration mode, which is yet another downgrade from the prior games. Time simply slows down and you can precisely take out enemies. 100 games have done this and 100 games have done it better. I'm tying this together with door breaching because it's just kicking in a door before using concentration mode. Typical Call of Duty door breach shit. Double that with Ben saying the same 3 terrible lines every single time you activate it. Some sort of Bible quote with a fuck thrown in for good edgy measure. I guess he's channeling his grampy Ray McCall in these moments.
I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, and I will bathe in the blood of my motherfucking enemies.
Guess that's all of them.
2. Flanking. This little mechanic had some potential. You are suppressed under heavy gunfire and you move from cover to cover as your team lays down fire back at the enemy until you reach a point adjacent to the enemies and take them all out from a flank. This was a neat idea and it of course was not as polished as it could have been, but I didn't hate it. But I did hate number 3. Driving. Nearly every level involves some sort of driving. I guess it was their idea of the modern horseback riding to get to a new area. What they failed to do though was to make it fun in single player. You see, in single player you are forced to drive and you cannot shoot while you drive. So what do? You drive around getting shot at for 5 minutes at a time, sometimes dying, and there's nothing you can do about it. You have to rely on your AI teammates to shoot the enemy, which they are hit or miss at. In co-op at least you have a real person shooting for you, or you get to shoot and they drive. But in single player, these sections were nonsensical. I don't understand how that made it through playtesting. Why not let the AI drive in these levels? They even coded that in. The AI does drive once and you get to shoot out of the window once, but the 7 or 8 other times you are forced into a driving section, you are stuck behind the wheel doing nothing but being useless. You don't even have to drive well. If you crash or otherwise lose the target, don't worry your little heart because the leader of the cartel will patiently wait for you in his Hummer to catch up before hitting mock Jesus again, just trying to get away from you. It was overwhelmingly the worst part of the game. Every time I was forced into driving a car, I wanted to play in traffic. These 3 things broke up the shitty shooting in the game, and at least in the driving sections, I'd rather just keep shooting. There is also secret agendas in each level as well, where you get a phone call, in Ben's case from a hooker or something, then they say something along the lines of, hey, this guy stole my purse, or this chick owes me money, so now you have a side objective to do in these levels, and this gets you points that unlock more weapons. Hooray for new weapons. While doing these side objectives though, you have to dodge your AI teammates because you are tampering with evidence or whatever, which makes no fucking sense. All three of you are dirty as fuck. In the first level of the game, you're burning a weed farm and tagging a rival gang's tag all over while wearing Obama masks. Why would they actually care about you nabbing some asshole's wallet? Well, they do. I don't see how this works in multiplayer co-op either. Why would you ever want to bust your partner for stealing stuff? Don't you want them to have better guns to shoot the enemy with? It just makes no fucking sense. Every level is the same shit. Driving to a location, talking to someone or each other, a series of shitty gunfights that spill over into multiple settings, and then ending in a car chase. Same formula repeated about 15 times, with some exceptions. Sometimes you have to shoot down a helicopter or something. It's really riveting stuff.
Nice.
I'm not usually one to bash on technical problems in my videos, but there are a few things that stood out to me that I feel are worth mentioning. For one, audio quality is absolutely shit. For a game made by a company this competent, the audio sounds like it was recorded in a porta potty on a work site.
Yeah, that's worked out well.
Enough. This interagency bullshit has got to stop.
And not only is the quality bad, but there are segments where audio is clipped pretty obviously.
Hey baby, you want a party? Talking to you, man. Fuck you, bitch. You don't talk to me like that. Hey, baby. You want a party?
Audio and cutscenes I can forgive, but the writing in this game is utterly obnoxious. The edgy, over-the-top tough guy act from pretty much every character is just tiresome. I get that maybe this stuff was cool back in 2011, but man, it's just cringe today. Plus, they misquote the fucking Colombian cartel saying. I don't know if it was intentional to distance themselves from the real cartel, or if it was just carelessness on Techland's part, but it is plato o plomo, silver or lead. This game interchanges that with gold. I don't know why, but it really irked me.
Either or, gold or lead. Oro o la chingada.
Plata o plomo. Ustedes eligen.
There are also several things in this gameplay that aren't easily ignored. I never shot down one myself, but I swear this is not how helicopters explode. When cars outrun you in the chase sequences, they kind of just wait for you to catch up, and then they peel out when you get back up to them. And I'm pretty sure that Hummer just did a bunny hop. When you are getting burned by fire as Ben, the screaming voice doesn't even match him. Sometimes it's a female scream. It's hilariously mismatched.
Let's get them before they get us.
Here we are at the plot to this game, and not surprisingly, this shit is shallow. The game begins with a backstory of a bombing done by the Mendoza cartel at the DEA offices in Los Angeles, killing 7 federal agents. And this is taken as an act of war, and a task force is assembled to infiltrate the cartel. A task force of 3 agents from 3 different agencies. From the DEA is Eddie, from the FBI is Kim, and from the LAPD is Ben. And while it may seem odd that a detective from the LAPD is involved in something this high up, he is personally related to one of the agents killed in the bombing, Patrick Stone, as well as one of the prime suspects of pulling off the bombing, Antonio Alvarez, since all 3 of them served together in the Vietnam War. Stone was in an active investigation of the sale of military-grade weapons to the cartel, and after the bombing, Stone's daughter, Jessica, contacted Ben, telling him that her father was threatened by Alvarez to stop several days before the bombing occurred, so the motive is there. The group starts their attack on the Mendoza cartel by shoving a stick into a spider's nest, as they say. They head up to the Sequoia National Park to a secret marijuana farm owned by a gang called the Vato Locos, and the DEA has known about this for a while, and they decide to burn down this farm and blame it on a rival gang called the Araña, or Spider in English. They double down after this by trashing a trap house owned by an LA gang called the Rolling 50s, again blaming the Araña. Essentially, they are stirring up street gangs to all be at arms with each other and halting any dealing of the cartel's drugs. They then go from drugs to a little higher up on the radar to sex trafficking. Ben has a thing for ladies of the night, and some of his girls have gone missing. They find out the owner of one of the strip clubs is stealing dancers and shipping them down to Mexico. So the trio put a stop to this operation as well.
Jesus, it stinks in here.
I can't believe they crammed them all in here.
They stumbled upon a deal that finally connects them to the actual cartel members. Araña is exchanging cash with the cartel and the team intercepts it as they suspect Alvarez will be present. And he is. But it is of course not that easy and he escapes. But the team doesn't acquire their cash. And this may have been corrupted by Kim because she was informed during the mission that Alvarez is actually an undercover FBI agent and is not to be arrested. From here they also start to move Jessica Stone around as they feel she is unsafe and in the process find out that she was contacted by former FBI agents named Kevin Donlevy that has something to give to her that was her father's. They arrange a meetup on a rooftop bar, but he is killed. In Ben's story, you assume Alvarez killed him, but if you play as Kim, then you know that she was given the order to kill him because she is told Donlevy was a part of the cartel. Jessica goes missing in the chaos. From here, the team gets some info that Jesus Mendoza, the son of Juan Mendoza, the leader of the Mendoza cartel, is coming to Los Angeles to handle an arms deal with a private military arms dealer named Peacekeepers International, run by a man named Michael Duke. They raid a strip club where Jesus is supposed to be, and they successfully kidnap him, finding out where the deal is to be done with Duke. Eddie disguises himself as Jesus, and the group goes to the deal, but Duke backs out, saying that he now wants the gold of Juarez in exchange for the guns, the gold being on display in a museum in these modern times. The group also finds out that Jessica is captured by the cartel, and there is an agreement to trade Jesus for the girl, but at the meetup someone shoots them both, killing them. This just gets crazy and it just really rolls out of control, so I'm just gonna speed through this. I'm sure no one really cares. In Jessica's dying breath, she reveals that she got the key from Donlevy that opens a safe with a recorded message from her father Patrick that explains in detail how corrupt the US government is, saying that the coordinator of the team, Dixon, is actually working with the cartel. Alvarez calls and wants to set up a new deal. He wants the team to give him the money that they stole in exchange for the location of the new gun deal between Duke and the cartel. They agree, so the team heads to Juarez, Mexico, specifically the fort used by Juan Mendoza in prior games, where they kill all of the men on both the cartel and the peacekeeper side and steal the weapons that they were trading there as well as the money. Alvarez then manipulates Duke and Juan Mendoza against each other, causing a war at Juan's mansion, and the trio of Ben, Eddie, and Kim show up in the chaos as well to attempt to arrest Juan and get his testimony and convict all the corrupt government agents, Dixon included. Duke is killed in a helicopter crash after he attacks the group and his men seem to fizzle out. Upon confronting Juan, he immediately surrenders, but shortly after, he's killed by a UAV drone strike to the face, and then the rest of the group is targeted after that. Dixon is trying to cover up her tracks and kill everyone involved so she doesn't, get arrested for conspiring with the cartel. The last person left alive that can testify against Dixon is Alvarez, and he is cornered at the end of the game by the group, and due to personal reasons, Ben wants him dead, because he did some war crimes in Vietnam or some shit, but he must stay alive in order to convict the greater evil. From here, there are 4 different endings depending on who you are playing as. There is one good ending and 3 unique bad ones. 1 per character. To get the good ending, no matter which character, you just have to choose to not kill Alvarez and to take him in alive. This leads to Dixon's arrest. Eddie also gets arrested. He's being investigated for leaking Jessica's location and ultimately getting her killed. And Kim gets arrested and gets investigated for the death of Donlevy because she shot him at the rooftop bar. Ben is off scot-free, and the game ends with him visiting Patrick and Jessica's grave and taking out a Bible to read, I guess referencing back to Ray McCall again. The 3 bad endings all start the same. You decide to kill Alvarez, which also means you decide to kill your teammates for whatever greedy reason each character has. Alvarez always escapes in every scenario, so he never dies. If you're playing as Ben, you want to kill Alvarez because of the war crimes that he committed in Nam. But of course, Alvarez gets away, and after killing the rest of his team, Ben is then seen in prison watching a news report that the government is deciding to invade Mexico to issue a war on the cartel due to the corruption of its government, and he also gets threatened by his cellmates there because he's an LAPD cop in LA County Prison. He also gets a postcard from Alvarez saying happiness is having friends in high places. If you're playing as Eddie, he decides to kill Alvarez and his teammates in order to take all of the money of the cartel and start up a new life for himself. He is shown in a hotel room with a girl and he's living his best life, but an assassin shows up on his balcony, killing them both, as a press conference with Dixon is shown on TV. She praises the team for destroying the cartel and she returns to her office, getting a call from the president praising her actions and receiving the same postcard from Alvarez, saying the same thing as in Ben's ending. And if you're playing as Kim, she kills her teammates kind of as self-defense to stop them from killing her and killing Alvarez, obviously, and taking the money. So she kills them anyway. And as shown at a press conference held by Dixon, she praises the group for crushing the cartel, and she cites the brave sacrifices of Ben and Eddie and hails the surviving Kim, giving her the FBI Medal of Honor. And in response, Kim punches her in the face on the stage, getting herself arrested. Dixon runs to her office and is greeted again with the same postcard from Alvarez. I feel like the bad ending for Kim is actually one of the best endings. Like, I feel like most justice is gonna come of that. Because, I mean, she punched the FBI director on national TV, there's obviously gonna be an investigation, and Dixon might get arrested for conspiring with the cartel. I mean, I guess Ben didn't need to die, but Eddie was the dirtiest one out of all of them, so he needed to die. So, I don't fucking know. All the endings suck. The story sucks. Once the game opened with a terrible highway shootout, like they chose to open the game that way, this is what they wanted to use you to get you hyped up for the game. I knew that it was going to be shit, and so did 50% of players of this game. Overall, the game is a boring shooter. Has a simple checkpoint system with health regeneration, the guns suck, the enemies are all the same. It's a game designed for co-op, so a lot of the missions suck in single player, especially the driving portions. All the environments are generic and lackluster. They could be in any single game at that time. There's nothing unique about them. The main characters are terrible. You don't like them at all. They all don't like each other, and by the end of the game, you don't really care what happened to anybody. They are just all miserable. Ben lives up to Ray's legacy with the McCall name. He is an absolute asshole and does terrible things, choking strippers, helping hookers with side jobs in exchange for favors, killing innocents in the line of duty. But he has some deep-rooted morals. He is faithful to his war buddy. He tried his best to keep his daughter safe, and when he sniffs out corruption up the chain of command, he sets his mind on correcting it, even if the vision may be cloudy with a little bit of personal vendettas across the way. He's also scared of heights, which I thought was a charming little throwback to Bound in Blood, where Ray is terrified on the mining platforms.
I'm sorry, brother, but I'm just not too good with heights.
Fuck. I have acrophobia.
Fear of heights? Are you fucking kidding me?
But overall, the characters were all terrible. There was a part where the three cops take turns beating a man to death in the middle of the highway, and I thought that was one of the most realistic parts of the game, you know? Typical LAPD shit. The game tries its hardest to continue to be a western. Ben wears a cowboy hat for some reason, and the game really tries to force dual-wielding revolvers onto you, like an old-school gunslinger. But when breaching doors, it's better if you have a semi-automatic pistol because you get more shots in slow-mo before you have to reload. The 5.7 is actually the best gun to use. It has like a 20-round magazine, and it makes door breaching a breeze. This game just didn't do anything right. I completely understand all of the criticisms on every point. Nothing about this game was fun or entertaining, and it's really sad because I wanted to like this game.
Who the fuck are you?
The police.
Techland had to be very careful when discussing the cartel. They weren't glorifying the cartel in any way, but of course plenty of outlets thought otherwise, and as a result, the game was banned in many places like Chihuahua, Mexico. But it all boils down to the same video games cause violence arguments that hold no water. Yes, the cartel is a shitty game, but it's not responsible for any kid picking up a gun and trying to be a gangster. Lorenzo Barraza, a youth worker who lives in Ciudad Juarez, where the game takes place briefly, said lots of kids say they want to be a hitman because they are the ones that get away with everything. And that sucks. That's terrible that kids in your community are saying that. But what the fuck does that have to do with Call of Juarez, the cartel? You don't play as a hitman. There are no hitmen. I guess aside from the guy in Eddie's ending, I guess. And no one gets away with anything in the game. The ending is actually very finite on most of these characters. The main characters are all cops and they're all in cuffs at the end. Perhaps you need to point your anger towards Agent 47. Ciudad Juarez is one of the most violent cities in the world, with a murder rate of roughly 8 people every single day. That violence has spilled over into the US as well. Since 2010, at least 40 people from El Paso, Texas, which is directly north of Ciudad Juarez, have been killed while visiting. The jailer for El Paso County Sheriff's Office was killed in 2010 in Ciudad Juarez. That also killed his wife and unborn child, and that's terrible. It really is. But again, it's being blamed on the wrong things. The El Paso County Sheriff's Office, Commander Gomencito Sergio Lopez bashes the Call of Juarez game, saying that it glorifies these criminals as heroes, same as the narco songs and gangster rap, something that the game, again, does not do. The Cartel is just one of those games that received a beating by video game violence advocates simply because of the name The Cartel. No one cares about the subject of the game. It's a video game, which means Little Jimmy has it, and Little Jimmy in the game is working for Pablo Escobar, sniffing kilometers of coke and blasting hookers with automatic military firearms. Buzzwords, buzzwords, buzzwords. Ban the game, save the kids. James Portnow of the YouTube channel Extra Credits heavily criticized the game, calling it a disgrace to game design, bringing attention to the achievement called Bad Guy that requires you to kill 40 bad guys in a level where the only bad guys are black gang members, and it's the only level where you're rewarded for killing a certain amount of people. He also criticizes the portrayal of sex trafficking in the game and how inaccurate it is to real life, something that I talked about a little earlier in the video. What can I really say? Critics and players alike just hated this game. There were some redeeming qualities with the co-op mode, the potential of a secret agenda mechanic, and the music was pretty nice, but the rest of the game just sucked. If you want to go through and nitpick the criticisms, you can. It had poorly implemented game mechanics, a cliche storyline, cringy middle school dialogue, no character development, shitty audio quality, incorrect subtitles, tone-deaf racial and gender stereotypes, poor graphics and animations, full of bugs, and lack of quality control when looking at the single-player portion of the game, with designs clearly focused on co-op gameplay. Due to game critics having no spines, some of them still gave the game decent scores, like 6 out of 10 from Eurogamer and GameSpot, but some game reviewers actually having the balls to speak their mind, like Jim Sterling from Destructoid, giving it a 2.5 out of 10, and PlayStation Lifestyle giving it an abysmal 1 out of 10. I wish more critics actually used the 1 to 10 scale, because in Eurogamer's eyes, their 6 out of 10 is pretty much a 0, but they are too chicken shit to actually give a 0. In conclusion, this game sucks. It was really bad, and it's by far the worst in the series, and probably one of the worst games I've ever covered on this channel. And it really has no redeeming qualities in my eyes. I am excited to move on to and cover Gunslinger now. So with that being said, I'd like to thank my patrons for holding it down. D. Schwinn, Kid Kingpin, Papa Boyga, Not Much, Zach Maddox, Doug Smith, Anonymous Starkweather, Sofa Pals Productions, Crash Bandicoot 25, Zachary Parkerson, Ben Stevens, and Ice Ham Jello, and my YouTube members THC Grey Wolf, Sofa Pals Productions, Grizzly Wizzly, Just Someone, Daniel Thor D Easy, and Diogo Brito. Thank you all for supporting the channel, and thank the rest of you for watching. I do hope to see you next time. Peace.